In early 1940, every time Adolf Hitler intervened, Germany won. On 13 February 1940, Hitler approved the Manstein Plan after overruling the General Staff's preferred approach. 6 weeks later, France collapsed. German after-action reports attributed success not to planning depth, but to decisive central intervention at the critical moment. The lesson absorbed by the system was unambiguous. Hesitation lost wars. Authority won them. This pattern repeated. In April 1940, Hitler ordered immediate action against Norway, despite naval staff objections over readiness and risk. The operation succeeded. German command records highlighted speed of political decision as the decisive variable. Procedural caution was framed as a liability. In May 1941, the same logic applied in the Balkans. Hitler ordered the invasion of Yugoslavia and Greece to secure the southern flank before Barbarossa. Logistical warnings were noted, then ignored. The campaigns ended in weeks. Again, intervention preceded victory. These outcomes did more than validate Hitler's authority. They retrained the system. Operational success became correlated with political override. General Staff resistance became associated with delay. Centralized direction became the mechanism by which uncertainty was resolved. Doctrine adapted accordingly. By late 1940, OKW planning documents increasingly assumed that major operational decisions would be taken at the political level. Flexibility at lower echelons was deprioritized in favor of unity of command. The system optimized for obedience, not adaptation. This belief was reinforced during the opening phase of Operation Barbarossa. Between June and September 1941, German forces advanced hundreds of kilometers into Soviet territory. Entire Soviet formations were encircled. German situation reports framed these outcomes as confirmation that firm direction prevented hesitation under complexity. Requests for operational pauses were routinely denied without immediate penalty. At this stage, intervention did not appear disruptive. It appeared corrective. But even within success, contradictions surfaced. By August 1941, supply reports from Army Group Center recorded fuel and maintenance deficits inconsistent with continued advance. Field commanders requested limited withdrawals to realign fronts and preserve combat power. These requests were denied. The denial was justified by reference to earlier victories where refusing retreat had produced collapse on the enemy side. The assumption hardened. Holding ground under pressure was a winning behavior. In December 1941, as Soviet counteroffensives began near Moscow, Hitler issued orders forbidding withdrawal. Units were instructed to stand fast regardless of local conditions. The order reflected confidence built over 2 years of success. Retreat had never been required before. Central control had always restored momentum. By January 1942, Hitler formally assumed direct command of the army. This was not a sudden rupture. It was the logical extension of a system that had learned the wrong lesson from success. At the moment of maximum confidence, the German command system completed its transformation. From a structure designed to adapt under uncertainty to one designed to enforce control when uncertainty appeared. The same mechanism that had accelerated victory now governed every response. Contradictions accumulate. The first contradictions appeared in command records, not in defeats. On 8 December 1941, OKW issued Directive No. 39, expanding Hitler's requirement for personal approval on operational withdrawals. This followed reports from Army Group Center that Soviet counterattacks near Moscow had disrupted supply lines and unit cohesion. Field commanders requested limited elastic retreats to restore front integrity. The requests were denied. The decision was justified internally by reference to earlier campaigns where holding ground had preceded recovery. Throughout the winter of 1941 to 1942, operational reports from the Eastern Front documented increasing divergence between orders and conditions. Army Group South reported fuel shortages severe enough to immobilize armored units while being ordered to maintain fixed positions. Army Group North recorded rising non-combat losses due to exposure and logistics breakdown. These reports were logged, but did not alter command assumptions. In January 1942, Hitler assumed direct command of the army. This institutionalized a pattern already emerging. Operational flexibility was replaced by positional control. Orders emphasized holding terrain rather than managing force preservation. The decision was consistent with prior success. Centralized authority had resolved uncertainty before. Production and replacement data began to conflict with this logic. By mid-1942, German replacement rates no longer matched losses on the Eastern Front. OKH strength reports showed divisions operating at 50 to 60% authorized manpower for extended periods. Requests for withdrawal to refit were routinely rejected. The assumption remained that firmness would stabilize fronts as it had in 1940 to 1941. Contradictions intensified during Operation Blue in the summer of 1942. Hitler repeatedly altered objectives, redirecting forces between the Caucasus and Stalingrad. These interventions were intended to accelerate decisive results. Instead, they fragmented operational focus. Logistics reports from August 1942 recorded supply lines exceeding planned capacity, while units remained under orders to advance or hold without adjustment. At Stalingrad, the pattern became explicit. In November 1942, encirclement reports from 6th Army headquarters reached OKW. Field commanders requested breakout authorization, while combat power remained sufficient. Hitler ordered the army to hold position, citing earlier examples where refusal to retreat had preserved fronts. Airlift feasibility assessments were presented as adequate, despite Luftwaffe transport capacity data indicating otherwise. The system attempted to compensate. Command responded to mounting strain by increasing central control. Orders became more detailed and restrictive. Local initiative was curtailed to prevent what leadership interpreted as loss of discipline rather than loss of capability. This reduced adaptation speed at lower echelons while increasing informational load at the top. Logistical stress worsened. Rail capacity declined under Allied bombing. Fuel allocations were centralized, slowing response times. Replacement flows were redirected without regard to unit readiness cycles. Each fix addressed symptoms while amplifying structural friction. Operational reports increasingly reflected a new reality. Units did not fail immediately when ordered to hold. They degraded. Combat power declined incrementally. Losses accumulated without recovery windows. Situations that could have been corrected through maneuver hardened into irreversible conditions. Failure did not arrive as a single decision. It emerged as an accumulation of resolved contradictions. System limit reached. By early 1943, two command systems were operating under incompatible logics. On 18th of January 1943, At Casablanca, Allied leadership formalized a command structure that delegated operational execution to theater commanders while reserving political direction for strategic objectives. The structure preserved local adaptation. In contrast, German command had consolidated decision authority upward. After January 1942, withdrawals, reallocations, and even battalion-level movements increasingly required approval routed through OKW and the Führer headquarters. The consequences were measurable. German operational throughput declined as decision latency increased. Army Group strength returns from March to July 1943 show divisions remaining under strength for months without rotation. Replacement inflow existed but could not be synchronized with unit needs. Orders to hold terrain prevented force regeneration. Loss absorption fell below loss intake. Soviet systems evolved in the opposite direction. Following reforms in late 1942, Stavka standardized operational planning and delegated execution to fronts with defined reserves. Replacement armies were formed, committed, and withdrawn on schedule. Losses were anticipated. Recovery windows were built into operations. Adaptation speed increased as control was distributed. At Kursk in July 1943, this asymmetry was explicit in reports rather than outcomes. German units entered the operation with reduced manpower, limited fuel, and constrained replacement pipelines. Soviet forces absorbed initial losses, committed reserves as planned, and sustained operations without awaiting central authorization for local adjustments. German requests for operational pauses were denied to maintain political objectives. Production data reinforced the divergence. In 1943, Germany produced approximately 19,800 aircraft, while losing more than 25,000 across all theaters. Pilot training hours were cut to increase output, reducing replacement quality. The system traded future capability for present continuity. The United States and the Soviet Union expanded both production and training simultaneously. Losses triggered replacement at scale. Command and control limits became decisive. German headquarters received more information than could be processed in time. Central approval was intended to impose coherence. It produced delay. Orders arrived after conditions changed. Units complied with outdated directives because deviation required authorization that could not arrive fast enough. Attempts to correct intensified failure. Hitler's insistence on holding ground increased encirclements, which increased emergency interventions, which further centralized control. Each iteration reduced adaptation speed. The system consumed itself, maintaining positional coherence it could no longer sustain. By 1944, the outcome was predetermined by rates, not resolve. German divisions dissolved after successive engagements because recovery time no longer existed. Allied formations regenerated continuously because recovery was embedded in the system. The decisive point had occurred earlier, when command structure shifted from enabling adaptation to enforcing compliance. The war ended not because one man interfered too much, but because a system replaced adaptability with control and could not reverse the choice.